Every empire believes its money is safe and convinces its people to believe the same. Every government insists its promises will last forever, and every time, history proves them wrong. From Rome to France, from the Confederacy to modern-day Lebanon, people have woken up to discover their savings worthless, their salaries meaningless, and their futures stolen by systems they once thought unshakable. Collapse isn't rare. Collapse is the rule. The real question isn't if financial systems fail, but how you'll protect yourself when they do. The illusion of permanence is the most dangerous financial mistake of all. We open our bank apps, look at the numbers on the screen, and feel safe. But money is not stone. Money is trust, and trust can vanish overnight. That's why history is both brutal and deeply instructive. Every collapse leaves behind lessons, patterns, and warnings about what truly protects wealth and what turns to dust. If you look closely, you'll see that the survivors of these disasters weren't the ones who trusted the most. They were the ones who doubted first. Take the Byzantine Empire. After the fall of the West, it kept Rome's legacy alive for another 1,000 years. At the heart of its economy was the solidus, a gold coin so stable that merchants from Europe to the Middle East to Asia accepted it without hesitation. For centuries, it was the closest thing the medieval world had to a global reserve currency. Now, here's a part my loyal viewers will appreciate. You'd think they would have learned from Rome's disaster with the silver denarius, when emperors kept diluting it until it was basically tin with a silver coat. We've told that story before. But no, centuries later, the Byzantines repeated the same mistake, this time with gold. They started reducing its purity, thinning the coins, mixing in cheaper alloys. At first, nobody noticed. Then, trust cracked. The coin that once anchored Mediterranean trade became just another political illusion. Debasement shattered its credibility, and with it, the Byzantine economy's stability collapsed. So, what survived? Paper promises? Government decrees? Number. The merchants who quietly stored real gold or land beyond the empire's reach kept their wealth, while everyone else watched theirs evaporate. That's the first timeless lesson. Governments can never resist the temptation to weaken their money. And when they do, real value flees to assets they cannot print. But not every collapse comes from rulers meddling with coins. Sometimes it strikes without warning. In the mid-14th century, Europe was hit by the deadliest pandemic in history, the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, nearly half of Europe's population was gone. Cities emptied, villages vanished, trade routes broke. Yet, the economic story of the plague isn't just one of destruction. Because when half the workforce disappears, labor becomes precious. Survivors could demand higher wages. Food and land, once scarce, became more abundant relative to people. Families with liquidity, silver, goods, or even just the ability to work suddenly gained bargaining power they'd never dreamed of. Land once worth a fortune could now be bought for a fraction. Houses stood empty, fields unplowed. The survivors found themselves in a buyer's market. If that sounds familiar, it should. We saw the modern version during COVID. Supply chains collapsed. Governments printed trillions to keep the machine running, and those with liquidity bought assets, while wage earners fell behind. In the US, housing prices soared. The stock market bounced back almost instantly, while millions of ordinary people struggled just to pay rent. The rhyme is clear. Pandemics redistribute wealth. They always have. Survivors of the Black Death used scarcity to climb the social ladder. Survivors of COVID, those with cash, snapped up properties, stocks, and businesses others could no longer afford to hold. The lesson isn't comforting, but it's true. Crises reward those with reserves and punish those without. Pandemics can flip economies overnight, but what about the collapse of institutions? The banking crash in Renaissance Florence teaches something equally vital. Institutions that seem too big to fail can fall like dominoes. In the 1340s, Florence was Europe's financial capital, home to mighty banking families like the Bardi and Peruzzi. These houses lent heavily to kings, most disastrously to England's Edward III, who defaulted during his wars with France. When Edward stopped paying, the banks collapsed. Depositors were ruined. Trade froze. Florence, once rich and powerful, fell into chaos. Ordinary citizens who had trusted the city's grand banking dynasties learned the hard way. Size isn't safety. Reputation isn't protection. What did they learn? Too big to fail is a lie as old as finance itself. Institutions exist to profit, not to guarantee your survival. When they fall, they take your savings with them. That lesson repeats through every century, from Florence's crash to Lehman Brothers in 2008, to Lebanon's frozen banks in 2019. Survival belongs to those who understand that an institution's promises are only good until the day they aren't. The American Civil War is remembered for its battles, politics, and the abolition of slavery. But behind the gunpowder and speeches was a brutal financial war that most Americans today barely know. Both the Union and the Confederacy discovered that wars of that scale demanded printing money. In the North, the government issued greenbacks, paper money backed not by gold, but by the promise of the United States itself. At first, it felt bold and patriotic, but the more greenbacks circulated, the less they bought. Inflation eroded their value and trust faltered. In the South, it was even worse. Desperate for resources, the Confederacy printed staggering amounts of graybacks. By war's end, inflation reached unimaginable levels. Prices up thousands of %, salaries buying almost nothing. Soldiers' paychecks were worthless before they could even spend them. Families carried sacks of bills that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. By 1865, Confederate money wasn't weak, it was dead. What mattered in that collapse wasn't paper promises, but tangible assets. Land, food, gold, anything real held value while money became a cruel joke. For ordinary Southerners, it was devastation. Lifelong savings turned to dust. For opportunists, though, the war was a fire sale, a chance to grab property and wealth at a fraction of the price. It's a lesson Americans rarely hear, but one they should never forget. Even your own nation has lived through a currency collapse, and when it happened, protection didn't come from trusting the paper in your wallet. It came from holding what inflation couldn't destroy. France offers a brutal reminder that revolutions can destroy money faster than any war. In the 1790s, revolutionaries overthrew the monarchy, seized church property, and issued a new paper currency, the assignat. In theory, these notes were backed by the value of confiscated land and meant to stabilize the economy. But as the government printed them without restraint, each new issue diluted the last. Prices soared, wages lagged behind, and soon the assignat became worthless. Farmers refused to sell food for paper, demanding silver or goods instead. Bread riots returned to Paris, and the revolution began to devour itself. The winners of this collapse weren't the ones holding patriotic paper. They were the ones holding food, gold, or property, things the government couldn't print. For the ordinary Parisian, the lesson came too late. No matter how noble a promise seems, it's worth nothing once people stop believing in it. 2 centuries later, the same lesson repeated itself in Asia. In 1997, a speculative attack on Thailand's baht spiraled into a regional crisis. Thailand had borrowed heavily in US dollars, confident its currency peg would hold. But when the peg broke, foreign-denominated debt became impossible to repay overnight. Investors fled. Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, all collapsed in a domino effect. Economies shrank, unemployment exploded, and governments begged the IMF for rescue. The people who suffered most weren't the hedge funds that sparked the panic. They were the ordinary citizens. Their savings wiped out, their mortgage payments doubled, their jobs gone. And yet, the pattern was painfully familiar. Those who held dollars or assets abroad survived. Those who trusted their local currency drowned. Nations dependent on foreign debt were forced into austerity, while global financial giants scooped up Asian assets for pennies on the dollar. What looked like a local collapse was, in truth, a global transfer of wealth. The lesson was clear. Debt in someone else's currency is a death trap. When the storm hits, it's not the creditor who drowns, it's the debtor. By now, the pattern should be obvious. Whether it's revolutionary France, Civil War America, or modern Asia, the themes never change. Paper money collapses. Debt chains both nations and families. And the survivors are never those who trusted the system most, but those who saw its fragility before it cracked. The most chilling truth of all is this. Collapse isn't history. It's happening right now. Between 2019 and 2021, Lebanon's banks did something that still feels unimaginable to most of the developed world. They locked their doors. Citizens couldn't access their accounts, withdraw money, or stop their currency from crashing. The Lebanese pound lost over 90% of its value. A lifetime of savings turned to pocket change. People lined up outside banks, begging to withdraw their own money, only to be told it was gone. And it wasn't just small savers, doctors, engineers, retirees, middle-class families. Anyone who trusted the system was wiped out. The lesson was cruel but clear. Your money in the bank isn't a treasure chest. It's a loan you've made to an institution that can simply decide not to pay you back in a crisis. Those who came out best were the ones who diversified abroad, held real assets like gold or property, or kept cash outside the system. Everyone else was trapped. If this sounds far away, it shouldn't. In 2008, Americans lost their homes while the banks that caused the crisis were bailed out. In 2020, governments printed trillions, inflating the asset prices of the wealthy while leaving ordinary wages frozen. In 2023, regional banks across the United States collapsed almost overnight as depositors lost confidence. The door slammed shut once again on the fairy tale we keep telling ourselves, that some banks are simply too big to fail. So, how do you protect yourself when everything falls apart? History tells us there's no single answer. In Byzantium, it was gold. After the Black Death, liquidity. In Florence, not trusting the bankers. In the Confederacy, tangible goods. In France, food and property. In Asia, staying away from foreign debt. And in Lebanon, getting out of the banks before they closed their doors. The patterns change, but the theme never does. Survival doesn't come from blind trust in paper or institutions. It comes from recognizing what holds real value when illusions collapse. And here lies a powerful paradox. Collapse is both a tragedy and an opportunity. For the unprepared, it means ruin. For the prepared, it's the chance of a lifetime. After the Black Death, peasants became landowners because the fields were empty. After 2008, those with cash bought homes while millions were foreclosed. Protection isn't just about defense. It's about being ready to seize what others are forced to give up. But wealth isn't measured only by what you own. It's also measured by what you can do. The survivors of history weren't just those who held gold or land. They were the ones who could still create value when others could not. The baker who kept making bread, the craftsman who repaired tools, the farmer who fed a community, the merchant who moved goods across borders. These people didn't just survive collapse. They rose from it. In every crisis, money loses its meaning, but production never does. People still need to eat, to build, to trade, to live. And those who can meet those needs are never poor for long. True protection isn't blind faith. It's real assets, real skills, and the awareness that illusions always collapse. Every crisis is a transfer, from the trusting to the prepared, from paper promises to tangible value, from passive savers to active builders. History has shown this pattern time and time again. The question isn't if everything will fall apart, because it always does. The real question is, will you be one of the many left holding empty promises, or one of the few holding something real? History never repeats itself exactly, but it always crushes those who ignore its warnings. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History already wrote the answers. I'm just here to show you where to find them.